You have been told that forgiveness is the ultimate virtue that to heal you must let go. But there is a dark, uncomfortable side to unconditional forgiveness that the ancient Stoics understood, and modern psychology is terrified to admit. Society demands you forgive everyone to find peace. They tell you holding a grudge is like drinking poison. They are lying to you. Forgiving certain acts is not healing. It is an invitation for your own psychological slaughter. When you blindly forgive, you do not cleanse your soul. You simply hand the predator a fresh weapon. There are three specific betrayals that Marcus Aurelius and Seneca warned would permanently fracture a human life. Forgive the first two and you lose your respect. Forgive the third and you lose your mind. We are going to dissect them, and by the time we are finished, you will stop apologizing to the people who are quietly destroying you. The calculated extraction, the betrayal of the pact. Most people confuse a mistake with a maneuver. When someone hurts you, your immediate instinct, programmed by years of social conditioning, is to find an excuse for them. You tell yourself they were stressed, they were confused, they didn't mean it. You project your own conscience onto a mind that operates on an entirely different algorithm. This is the first betrayal you must never forgive. The calculated extraction. This is not a crime of passion. It is a crime of mathematics. Seneca wrote to his friend Lucilius with a brutal warning about the nature of human connection. He instructed him to judge a man deeply before admitting him to his inner circle, but once admitted to trust him completely. Seneca understood that true loyalty is a structural pact. Think of trust as the structural spine of any human connection. When that spine bears the heavy weight of daily life, it compresses. It aches under the stress of disagreements, misunderstandings, and fatigue, but it holds. It flexes. A calculated extraction does not compress the spine. It severs the spinal cord entirely. This happens when someone close to you, a partner, a business associate, a lifelong friend, commits an act of betrayal that required logistics. They had to lie on Tuesday to set up the deception for Thursday. They had to look you in the eye, smile, ask about your day, and mentally track the narrative they were spinning. They had to weigh the value of your pain against the value of their gain. They sat in the theater of their own mind, ran the simulation of your devastation, and decided that the payoff was worth it. When you uncover this, what do? You demand an explanation. You cry. You listen to their apologies. They weep. They tell you they were lost, that they didn't know what they were doing. Stop. Look at the mechanics of the act. Eric, from the legendary psychoanalyst, dissected the architecture of human connection in the art of loving. He separated authentic love from transactional attachment. Authentic connection requires the absolute recognition of the other person's reality. Transactional attachment views the other person simply as a resource, a dispenser of comfort, money, or validation. When a person executes a calculated extraction, they are revealing the brutal truth. You are not a person to them. You are a utility. Why do you forgive this? You forgive it because the alternative is terrifying. If you do not forgive them, you have to admit that the last 5 years of your life were built on a hallucination. You have to mourn the death of a person who is still breathing. You have to dismantle your life, separate your finances, explain the collapse to your family, and face the absolute terror of starting over. Your ego cannot handle the humiliation of being played, so your brain creates a back door. It tells you, if I forgive them, I regain control. If my love is strong enough to absorb this blow, I win. This is a toxic delusion. When you forgive a calculated maneuver, you are teaching the predator that their mathematics were correct. You're telling them that the cost of breaking you is entirely affordable. You do not gain their respect through your mercy. You confirm your status as prey. Marcus Aurelius, ruling an empire surrounded by assassins and sycophants, wrote in his Meditations, "It is your own fault if you are surprised that a bad man does bad things." He did not preach revenge. Revenge is an emotional reaction, and emotions are leverage for the enemy. He preached absolute cold removal. You do not need to scream. You do not need to burn their possessions. You simply look at the data. The data states that this organism will consume your resources at the cost of your structural integrity. You sever the connection. You cut the infected tissue. If you attempt to surgically fuse the bones of this relationship back together with forgiveness, you might numb the pain for a while, but the paralysis of trust is permanent. You will spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder in your own home. You will become a paranoid, anxious shadow of yourself, constantly policing their behavior, waiting for the next strike. They did not make a mistake. They made a choice. Your only logical response is to make them a ghost. Why do you apologize when the knife is in your own back? Why do you twist your own perception of reality just to keep the peace with someone who profits from your confusion? We're descending now into a much darker psychological basement. The first betrayal attacks your resources and your trust. This next betrayal attacks the very mechanism you use to perceive the world. The betrayal of reality, the subversion of sanity. In the 1st century AD, the Roman Emperor Domitian hosted a dinner party for the highest-ranking senators of Rome. These men were powerful, wealthy, and entirely dependent on the emperor's favor for their survival. When they arrived at the palace, they were led into a dining hall painted entirely pitch black. The ceiling, the walls, the floor black. The food served to them was dyed black. At the head of each senator's couch was a tombstone carved with their own name. For hours they sat in the dim light, eating black food in absolute terror, convinced they were going to be executed the moment the meal ended. Domitian spoke only of death and slaughter in a calm, hypnotic voice. When the agonizing night finally ended, they were dismissed. They returned home waiting for the assassins. Instead, a messenger arrived from the emperor, delivering expensive gifts and the very silver tombstones from the banquet, now polished and offered as a token of friendship. Domitian did not kill their bodies. He executed their grip on reality. He intentionally subjected them to extreme psychological terror, only to immediately flood them with relief and gifts. He scrambled their internal compass. They could no longer trust their own instincts. If terror meant safety, and safety meant terror, the only thing they could rely on was Domitian himself. This is the betrayal of reality. In modern clinical terms, it is the darkest form of gaslighting. It happens when someone violates you, lies to you, or manipulates you, and then immediately attacks your perception of the event. I never said that. You are remembering it wrong. You are too sensitive. You're making a big deal out of nothing. You're acting crazy. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus was a slave before he gained his freedom. He walked with a permanent limp because his master had twisted his leg until it snapped. Epictetus knew what physical brutality was, yet he argued that a man's physical body is not his most precious possession. Your most vital asset is your hegemonicon, your ruling center. It is your ability to observe the world, process the data logically, and form an accurate judgment. If you lose a leg, you can still reason. If you lose your hegemonicon, you lose your humanity. You become a puppet. When someone commits the betrayal of reality, they are attempting to assassinate your ruling center. Psychologist Dr. Jennifer Freereed of the University of Oregon introduced a concept called betrayal trauma theory. Her research uncovered a terrifying survival mechanism built into the human brain. When you are betrayed by someone you fundamentally depend on, a parent, a spouse, a primary source of emotional stability, your brain faces a catastrophic conflict. If you acknowledge the betrayal, you must break the attachment. But if you break the attachment, you feel you might not survive. So what does the brain do? It initiates betrayal blindness. It literally shuts down your awareness of the violation. It forces you to forget, to minimize, or to accept the abuser's twisted version of reality simply to maintain the illusion of safety. You actively participate in your own gaslighting because the truth is too isolating to bear. This is not forgiveness. This is psychological suicide. When you forgive the betrayal of reality, you are handing over the master key to your mind. Look at the mechanics of this interaction. You catch them in a lie. You present the evidence. Instead of feeling remorse, their survival instinct activates, but they do not defend their actions. They attack your competence. They systematically dismantle your confidence in your own memory. They use your love, your empathy, and your desire for harmony as weapons against you. They will keep pushing until you are the one apologizing for catching them. The moment you say, maybe you're right, maybe I overreacted, you lose. You have just allowed a foreign virus into your mental hard drive. Over time, you will stop trusting your own gut. You will stop trusting your own eyes. You will require their validation to know if you are happy, if you are sad, or if you're sane. You become the senators at the black banquet, terrified, confused, and deeply grateful for the poison they feed you. Do not dare call this endurance. Do not dress your submission up as Stoic patience. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." You cannot be the master of yourself if someone else is writing the code for your reality. There's no negotiation here. There's no therapeutic conversation that will fix a predator who alters the fabric of truth to escape accountability. They do not respect your empathy. They study it to find its blind spots. When you encounter the betrayal of reality, you must respond with cold, absolute, definitive action. You do not argue. Arguing shows them that you still believe their words have weight. You do not explain your perspective. Explaining is a plea to be understood by someone who is actively committed to misunderstanding you. You anchor yourself to the objective facts. You look at them with the dead, flat gaze of someone who has seen the machinery behind the magic trick, and you walk away. You walk away not to punish them, but to quarantine your mind. You protect your hegemonic and at all costs because the world is already chaotic enough. If you allow someone to rot the foundation of your own perception, you will spend your entire life building castles in a swamp. Are you starting to see the pattern? The people who tell you to forgive everything are often the ones who benefit from your lack of boundaries. They weaponize your morality against you. But there is one final betrayal. This one does not attack your resources, does not attack your sanity. It attacks the very core of your identity. It is the betrayal that sneaks in so quietly you do not even realize you're bleeding until you look in the mirror and fail to recognize the face looking back at you. If you forgive this third betrayal, there's nothing left to save. The betrayal of essence, the parasitic assimilation. We have arrived at the final threshold. The first betrayal steals your resources. The second betrayal attacks your sanity. You can recover wealth, and with enough distance, you can rebuild your grip on reality. But this third betrayal is lethal because it does not feel like an attack. It feels like love. It feels like concern. It feels like safety. It is the betrayal of essence. It happens when someone close to you, someone you trust unconditionally, systematically attempts to assassinate your potential, your ambition, and your core identity simply because your growth makes them uncomfortable. In the year 193 AD, the Roman Empire experienced one of the most grotesque betrayals in human history. The Taurian Guard was an elite unit of soldiers specifically created for one purpose: to protect the emperor. They were the ultimate inner circle. They slept outside his doors. They held the keys to the palace. They were the only men allowed to carry weapons in his presence. Emperor Pertinax assumed the throne and immediately tried to reform the corruption within Rome, demanding discipline and virtue. This made the Taurian Guard deeply uncomfortable. They preferred the old, lazy, corrupt ways. They did not want to be held to a higher standard. So what did the protectors do? They walked into the palace, assassinated the emperor they swore to protect, and then did something unthinkable. They retreated to their fortified camp, stood on the walls, and literally auctioned the Roman Empire to the highest bidder. A wealthy and competent man named Didius Julianus bought the world for 25,000 sesterces per soldier. The inner circle, the ones trusted with the emperor's very life, sold his vision, his empire, and his blood simply because his evolution threatened their comfort. This is exactly what happens in the betrayal of essence. You have a Taurian Guard in your life right now. It might be a partner, a parent, or a lifelong friend. They claim to support you. They claim to have your best interests at heart. But the moment you attempt to reform your life, the moment you set a boundary, pursue a massive goal, or stop tolerating mediocrity, they turn on you. But they do not attack you with swords. They attack you with guilt. Listen to the poison they whisper into your ear. You are working too hard. You are going to burn out. Why are you acting like you are better than everyone else now? You've changed. You used to be so much more fun. I miss the old you. Eric, from In the Art of Loving, dissected this exact dynamic. He warned against the trap of the symbiotic union. In a healthy, mature connection, two people stand side by side, maintaining their individual strength. But in a symbiotic attachment, one person acts as the host, and the other acts as the parasite. The parasite does not want you to be strong. The parasite wants you to be accessible. When you start to lift weights, build a business, read philosophy, or demand respect, you are growing armor. The parasite panics because they cannot penetrate armor. They need you soft. They need you insecure. They need you exactly where you were 5 years ago. So they do not have to confront their own stagnation. They will try to sabotage your diet. They will start arguments right before your most important meetings. They will plant subtle seeds of doubt about your intelligence or your capability. They auction off your future just to buy their own temporary emotional comfort. Why is this the most dangerous betrayal? Because if you forgive this, you are agreeing to your own eraser. When you forgive the person who sabotages your growth, you are looking them in the eye and saying, "You are right. My potential is not as important as your comfort. I will shrink so you do not have to stretch." You begin to self-mutilate your own soul. You stop talking about your wins. You hide your ambitions. You lower your standards. You become a hollow shell of the person you were meant to be, walking around in a state of quiet, desperate resentment. The philosopher Epictetus was ruthless about this specific dynamic. He stated, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." He meant that true elevation requires leaving the herd behind. Your evolution will inevitably trigger the insecurities of the people who refuse to climb. You cannot drag them up the mountain with you. If you try, they will pull you back down into the dirt. Forgiving the betrayal of essence is not an act of grace. It is an act of cowardice. It is the refusal to accept the brutal truth that the person you love is fundamentally incompatible with the person you are destined to become. You must cut the rope. You must let them keep their comfort while you keep your destiny. If you do not, you will wake up in 20 years. Look back at the empire you could have built and realize you let the gods burn it to the ground. Why do we do it then? Why do we continuously open the gates for the people who pillage our minds and sell our potential? We do it because we have been poisoned by the myth of the moral high ground, the delusion of unconditional forgiveness. You have been conditioned by a weak, terrified society to believe that forgiveness is an unconditional mandate. You're told that if you do not forgive, you are bitter. If you hold a boundary, you are toxic. If you cut someone off, you lack empathy. This is a lie designed to keep predators fed and victims obedient. Society pushes unconditional forgiveness because society prioritizes surface-level harmony over deep structural justice. It is easier for your family to tell you to just forgive your brother than it is for them to hold your brother accountable for destroying your credit score. It is easier for the culture to preach, let it go, than it is to teach people how to stand their ground. Let us destroy this myth using the cold calculating logic of the Stoics. Seneca, in his third letter to Lucilius, outlined the absolute law of human association. He wrote, "After friendship is formed, you must trust, but before that, you must judge." The modern world has this entirely backward. We judge people harshly for their opinions, their clothes, or their politics, but we trust them blindly with our psychological safety. We hand the keys to our minds to people who have not proven they know how to drive, and when they crash our car into a wall, we are told we must forgive them to heal. Understand the fundamental difference between internal release and external access. You absolutely must let go of the anger. Anger is a hot coal you hold in your hand. It burns you, not them. Marcus Aurelius commanded himself not to waste energy on the malice of others. The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. But letting go of the anger does not mean opening the door. You can look at a venomous snake, understand that it is in its nature to bite, forgive it for being a snake, and still refuse to let it sleep in your bed. Forgiveness in the mainstream sense implies a return to the prior state. It implies that the slate is wiped clean. It implies that trust is restored. You cannot restore trust with someone who committed a calculated extraction, a betrayal of reality, or a betrayal of essence. To do so is to defy the laws of physics. If a bridge collapses because the steel was rotten, you do not drive your car over it the next day just because the architect apologized. You must separate your emotional healing from their physical access to your life. When you refuse to forgive these specific betrayals, you are not holding a grudge. You are holding a standard. You are looking at the universe and declaring my psychological integrity is worth more than their temporary validation. This level of boundary setting terrifies people. They will call you cold. They will call you Machiavellian. They will say you are incapable of love. Let them speak. Their words are the desperate gasps of manipulators who have lost their leverage. The predator always accuses the prey of cruelty when the prey grows teeth. How do you actually execute this? How do you remove someone from your life when your entire emotional system is screaming at you to fall back into the familiar trap, the architecture of indifference? You do not fight them. You do not argue. You do not send a long emotional text message explaining exactly how they hurt you. When you explain your pain to a manipulator, you are not giving them an epiphany. You are giving them a manual. You are showing them exactly where your weak spots are for the next attack. You must transition from the state of the victim to the state of the architect. The victim begs the invader to leave the castle. The architect simply raises the drawbridge and watches the invader starve in the moat. You apply the Stoic concept of apatheia. This does not mean apathy in the modern sense of laziness. It means the eradication of irrational emotional turbulence. It is the state of being completely untouched by the chaos of others. You observe their betrayal as if you are a scientist observing a chemical reaction. Ah, you say to yourself, Subject A has lied to protect their image. Subject A has attempted to distort my reality. This indicates a low-value character structure. The logical response is removal. No tears, no screaming, just a cold, calculated shift in logistics. If they are a coworker, you reduce all communication to strictly professional documented channels. If they are a family member, you become impossibly busy. You answer questions with one word. You strip all emotion, all warmth, and all vulnerability from your interactions. You become a gray rock, smooth, uninteresting, and impossible to extract resources from. Eventually, the parasite will realize the host is dead. They will leave to find a softer target. This requires a brutal level of self-control. You will have to sit with the discomfort of being the bad guy in their narrative. They will run to mutual friends and spin elaborate stories about how you abandoned them. They will play the victim flawlessly. You must not care. Epictetus reminds us that it is not things that upset us, but our judgments about things. If you judge their smear campaign as a threat, you will suffer. If you judge their smear campaign as the predictable, pathetic flailing of an exposed manipulator, you will feel nothing but a mild, distant pity. You are building a fortress. The foundation of that fortress is the absolute certainty that you do not need anyone who requires your destruction to survive. We've explored the 3 betrayals that fracture the soul. The calculated extraction, which proves you are a utility, not a human. The betrayal of reality, which attempts to overwrite your sanity with their lies. The betrayal of essence, which demands you sacrifice your potential to coddle their insecurity. You now possess the forbidden mechanics of these interactions. You see the strings. You know how the trap is set. But seeing the trap is not enough. You have to be willing to step completely outside of it, even if it means walking into the cold, isolating wind of true independence. Most people will watch this and go right back to their abusers. They will go right back to the partner who gaslights them. They will go right back to the friend who mocks their ambition. They will choose the warmth of a familiar hell over the freezing altitude of freedom. They will forgive, and they will slowly, quietly decay. But you are not most people. You have stayed until the end because you feel the absolute, uncompromising truth in these words. You're ready to stop bleeding for people who hold the knife. Think about the person you have forgiven the most in your life, the one you made excuse after excuse for. Look at the trajectory of that relationship. Did your endless forgiveness force them to rise to a higher standard of honor, or did it simply teach them exactly how much disrespect you are willing to tolerate? Did they change, or did you just get weaker? You know the answer. What if the darkness you are so terrified of stepping into is the only thing that can actually protect you? What if becoming cold to the manipulators is the only way to keep your fire alive for the people who truly deserve it? The era of your unconditional submission is over. If this opened your eyes, understand this is only what I can show publicly. There are videos I cannot upload for everyone. There are aspects of dark psychology that I simply cannot discuss publicly on YouTube without being censored or demonetized. The algorithm suppresses the most powerful information. Those exist behind the join button. If you're still here, you're not like the others. Subscribe if you haven't. But if you want what's hidden, click the join button and step into the architect level. You will unlock exclusive, uncensored videos that dive into the deepest parts of the human psyche. Most won't. That's the point.